Have you ever spent more than half of your life taking care of everyone else, only to wake up one morning and realize that the house is suddenly quiet? No school bags on the floor, no voices calling mom from another room, no rush, no chaos, no noise. Just silence. For years, you were needed every single day. And then one day, your children grow up, leave home, and start their own lives. And suddenly you ask yourself a question you never expected to ask. What happens to a mother when her children no longer need her? This is the story of a woman who faced that exact moment. At first, she thought the quiet house meant loneliness, but what she discovered instead was the beginning of a life she had forgotten she deserved.
For 27 years, Linda's life followed a rhythm that rarely changed. Every morning began before sunrise. The kitchen lights would turn on while the rest of the house was still asleep. Coffee would start brewing, breakfast would be prepared. Then came the familiar routine. "Mom, where are my shoes? Mom, I can't find my notebook. Mom, can you sign this?" The house was always alive with voices. Linda didn't mind the chaos. In fact, she loved it, because every moment reminded her that she was needed. Being a mother had become more than just a role in her life. It had become her identity. Her children's schedules shaped her days. School drop-offs, after-school activities, homework help, family dinners.
Even when she worked part-time, her mind was always thinking about her kids. Did they eat enough lunch? Did they remember their homework? Were they happy? Like many mothers, Linda rarely asked herself what she wanted. Her happiness came from seeing her children grow. Years passed faster than she expected. Birthdays turned into graduations, elementary school became high school, and one by one, her children started becoming independent. At first, it felt like something to celebrate. After all, every parent wants their children to succeed. But success comes with change, and change often arrives quietly. The first real moment came the day her oldest son moved out. His car was packed with boxes, clothes, books, a few childhood memories he decided to take with him. Linda stood near the driveway watching him close the trunk. She smiled proudly. "You're gonna do great," she said. He hugged her and laughed. "Mom, I'll call you every week." She believed him, and he meant it. But as the car drove away, the house felt slightly different. Not empty, just quieter.
Still, there were 2 more kids at home. Life continued. The routine remained. Years later, her second child left for college. Again, Linda stood at the door. Again, she smiled. Again, she said the same words. "Drive safely. Call me when you arrive." And again, the house became a little quieter. But it was the day her youngest daughter left that truly changed everything. That morning, Linda woke up earlier than usual. She made pancakes for breakfast, just like she had done when her daughter was little. They talked, laughed, and shared stories about the future. College plans, new friends, big dreams. When the time came to leave, they hugged tightly. "Mom," her daughter said softly, "you've done everything for us." Linda smiled. That's what moms do. The car slowly pulled away from the house. Linda waved until it disappeared around the corner. For a moment, she stood there in the quiet driveway. Then she walked back inside. And that's when she noticed something strange. The house felt different. Not just quiet, empty. No footsteps upstairs, no music playing from a bedroom, no voices calling her name. She walked through the living room slowly. Every object felt familiar, but the energy had changed. The couch where they used to watch movies together, the kitchen table where homework was done, the hallway where backpacks once lined the wall. All of it was still there, but the life inside the house had moved on. Linda sat down at the kitchen table and looked around. For the first time in decades, there was nothing she needed to prepare. No school lunches, no rides to give, no schedules to organize. The day stretched ahead of her in complete silence. And suddenly, a thought appeared in her mind, a question she had never asked before. If I'm no longer raising children, who am I now? It wasn't a sad question, but it was unfamiliar.
For so many years, Linda had been someone's mother first. Her own dreams had quietly stepped aside. And now that the house was empty, those forgotten dreams were slowly returning. At that moment, Linda didn't realize it yet, but the quiet house wasn't the end of her purpose. It was simply the space where a new chapter of her life was about to begin.
The first few days after her youngest daughter left felt strangely quiet. Not sad exactly, just unfamiliar. For years, Linda had woken up every morning with a purpose. Someone needed breakfast, someone needed a ride, someone needed help finding their shoes or finishing homework. But now, when she woke up in the morning, the house remained still. The alarm clock rang out of habit. She walked into the kitchen and poured herself a cup of coffee, and then she stood there for a moment, staring at the empty dining table. 3 chairs were empty. For a long time, that table had been the center of her world. Homework was done there, stories were shared there, arguments, laughter, and family dinners had filled the room. Now the table looked untouched. The silence felt heavier than she expected. At first, Linda tried to stay busy. She cleaned the house, she organized old closets, she sorted through boxes filled with years of memories. One afternoon, she found an old photo album. It was full of pictures from when the children were small. They were photos of messy birthday cakes, family vacations at the beach, first days of school. Linda sat on the couch, flipping through the pages slowly. She smiled at the memories, but something inside her also felt a quiet ache. Not because she was unhappy for her children, she was proud of them. They were growing, building their own lives, chasing their dreams. But the truth was, something many mothers rarely talk about. When children grow up, a part of a mother's identity changes too. For years, her life had revolved around caring for others. Now, she had time, a lot of time, and that space felt strange. Some evenings felt longer than usual. She would sit on the couch watching television, but her mind wasn't really focused on the screen. The quiet house reminded her that life had shifted. One evening, her phone rang. It was her daughter calling from college. "Mom, guess what? I got accepted into the campus art club." Linda smiled immediately. "That's wonderful, sweetheart." Her daughter talked excitedly about her new friends, her classes, and the busy life on campus. Linda listened carefully, just like she always had. After the call ended, she placed the phone on the table and sat quietly for a moment. And suddenly, she noticed something surprising. She wasn't sad. She was proud. Her children were doing exactly what she had always hoped for them. They were growing into independent adults, and that meant she had done her job well. But then another thought slowly entered her mind. If her children were beginning a new chapter of their lives, maybe she could begin one too. The idea felt unfamiliar at first. For so long, she had placed her own interests aside. Years earlier, before marriage and children, Linda used to enjoy painting. She remembered how peaceful it felt to sit with a blank canvas and a set of colors. But life had become busy. Responsibilities came first. Dreams quietly waited in the background. That evening, Linda walked over to her laptop and opened it. She typed something simple into the search bar: local art classes near me. Several options appeared on the screen: community centers, weekend workshops, evening classes. Her finger hovered over the mouse for a moment. Part of her felt unsure. Was she too old to start something new? Would she feel out of place? But another voice inside her said something different. Why not? The next morning, Linda signed up for a beginner's art class at the local community center. It was a small step, but it felt important. A few days later, she walked into the classroom feeling slightly nervous. There were people of different ages sitting at tables with paintbrushes and blank canvases. The instructor greeted her warmly. "Welcome. Just pick any seat you like." Linda sat down and looked at the empty canvas in front of her. For a moment, she simply stared at it. It reminded her of something: the quiet house, the empty space. But this canvas didn't represent loss. It represented possibility. Slowly, she picked up a paintbrush. The first stroke felt uncertain. The second stroke felt easier. And as colors began to appear across the canvas, Linda noticed something surprising. She felt alive. For the first time in a long while, Her mind wasn't focused on what had ended. It was focused on what was beginning. 2 hours passed quickly. When the class ended, Linda stepped outside into the cool evening air. She felt lighter than she had in months. That night, as she sat in her living room, the house was still quiet, but the silence felt different. It no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. Because for the first time since her children had left home, Linda realized something important. Her story wasn't over. In fact, it might just be starting again. The art class quickly became one of Linda's favorite parts of the week. At first, she had joined simply to fill the empty hours in her schedule, but slowly, something deeper began to happen. Each time she sat in front of the blank canvas, she felt a quiet sense of freedom. There were no expectations, no responsibilities, no one asking her for anything, just colors, brushes, and time. And in that quiet creative space, Linda began to rediscover something she hadn't felt in years, her own identity. For so long, her life had been defined by the roles she played for others: mother, wife, caretaker. But now she was slowly learning how to be something else too, herself. One afternoon after class, the instructor stopped beside her painting. "You have a natural eye for color," he said kindly. Linda laughed softly. "I haven't painted in over 30 years. "That doesn't matter," he replied. "Sometimes talent simply waits for the right moment to return." Those words stayed with her for the rest of the evening. Talent waits. Maybe dreams did too. Over the next few weeks, Linda began exploring other parts of life she had quietly set aside. She started taking longer morning walks around the neighborhood. At first, the walks were simply a way to clear her mind, but soon they became something she genuinely looked forward to. The fresh air, the peaceful streets, the simple rhythm of her footsteps. Sometimes she would notice small things she had ignored for years. The way sunlight filtered through the trees, the sound of birds in the distance, the quiet beauty of an ordinary morning. For the first time in decades, she wasn't rushing from one responsibility to the next. She was simply present. One day during her walk, Linda passed a small local cafe she had never visited before. On impulse, she stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air. Soft music played in the background. She ordered a cup of coffee and sat by the window. At first, it felt slightly strange sitting there alone, but as she watched people pass by outside, she realized something unexpected. Being alone didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. That realization surprised her. For years, she had believed that a full house meant happiness, and a quiet house meant emptiness. But now, she understood something different. Peace could exist in quiet places too. Later that week, something interesting happened. During one of her art classes, another woman around her age sat down at the same table. Her name was Carol. They began talking casually while they painted. Carol had a story that sounded surprisingly familiar. Her children had also moved away. She had also spent years focusing entirely on her family, and she had also found herself wondering what came next. The two women laughed at how similar their experiences were. It felt comforting to know she wasn't alone in this stage of life. After class, Carol suggested something simple. "Would you like to grab coffee sometime after class next week?" Linda paused for a moment, not because she didn't want to, but because she suddenly realized something. It had been a long time since she had formed new friendships. Most of her social life had revolved around school events, family gatherings, and activities connected to her children. But now she was meeting people simply as herself. And that felt refreshing. "Sure," Linda said with a smile. Over the next few weeks, the two women began meeting regularly, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for a walk, sometimes simply to talk. They shared stories about motherhood, life changes, and the strange experience of adjusting to a quieter home. And slowly, Linda noticed something remarkable. The emptiness she once feared was slowly being replaced with something new: possibility. Her days were no longer just about remembering the past. They were becoming about discovering the future. One evening, Linda sat at her kitchen table again, the same table that once felt so empty. But this time, the feeling was different. She looked around the room and smiled softly. The house was still quiet, but it no longer felt like something was missing. Instead, it felt like space. Space to grow, space to explore, space to become someone new. And for the first time since her children had left home, Linda realized something important. Her life had not become smaller. In many ways, it had just begun to expand. As the months passed, Linda began to notice something quietly beautiful happening in her life. The silence that once felt uncomfortable was slowly becoming peaceful. Her mornings had changed. Instead of waking up with a long list of responsibilities, she now started her day slowly. A warm cup of coffee, soft sunlight through the kitchen window, sometimes a walk around the neighborhood, sometimes an hour spent painting at the small desk she had set up in her living room. The house was still the same, but the way she experienced it had completely changed. For years, every room had been connected to someone else's needs. Now the space belonged to her, and she was finally learning how to fill it with things that made her happy. One afternoon during her art class, something unexpected happened. The instructor gathered the students together and made an announcement. "Our community center is hosting a small local art exhibition next month," he said. "If anyone would like to display their work, you're welcome to submit one painting." Several people in the class immediately seemed excited. Linda stayed quiet. The idea felt both exciting and intimidating. She had only recently started painting again. Her work was personal, almost private. The thought of showing it publicly made her nervous. After class ended, she began packing her brushes into her bag. But the instructor walked over and gently placed one of her paintings on the table. "You should consider submitting this," he said. Linda looked at the painting. It was a simple landscape, soft colors, warm sunlight across an open field. "It's beautiful," he added. Linda hesitated. "I'm not sure it's good enough." The instructor smiled kindly. "Sometimes the most meaningful art comes from people who aren't trying to impress anyone." That evening, Linda thought about those words for a long time. Good enough. How many times had she questioned herself over the years? As a mother, she had always tried to do everything perfectly. Perfect meals, perfect schedules, perfect support for her children. But life was never about perfection. It was about growth. And growth often begins with courage. The next morning, Linda returned to the community center and submitted her painting for the exhibition. It felt like a small act of bravery, but it also felt empowering. Over the next few weeks, she continued painting, not because she wanted recognition, but because she genuinely enjoyed the process. Painting had become something special to her. It was quiet, it was calming, it was hers. Finally, the day of the art exhibition arrived. The community center was filled with people, local artists, families, visitors walking through the gallery. Linda stood near the entrance, feeling slightly nervous. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. But when she walked through the gallery and saw her painting hanging on the wall, something inside her shifted. Her name was written beside it. Linda Parker, artist. For a moment, she simply stared at it. Not with pride exactly, but with quiet appreciation. Because that painting represented more than colors on a canvas. It represented a new version of her life. Later that evening, a woman stopped in front of the painting and looked at it for a long moment. "It feels peaceful," the woman said softly. Linda smiled. "Thank you." The woman nodded. "It reminds me that life can be calm and beautiful, even after big changes." Linda understood exactly what she meant, because that painting wasn't just art. It was a reflection of everything she had been learning. After the exhibition ended, Linda walked outside into the cool evening air. The sky was slowly turning orange as the sun began to set. She took a deep breath and looked around. A year earlier, she had stood in this same quiet house, feeling unsure about her future. But now she understood something powerful. The empty house hadn't taken anything away from her. It had given her something instead. Space. Space to rediscover herself. Space to grow. Space to build a life that belonged not only to her children, but to her as well. And in that quiet moment under the evening sky, Linda realized something she never expected. For the first time in many years, she felt completely at peace with the woman she had become. One quiet Sunday morning, Linda woke up earlier than usual. The house was still peaceful, just like it had been for the past year. But something inside her felt different. She walked into the kitchen and poured herself a cup of coffee. Then she stepped outside onto the small porch behind her house. The morning air was fresh and calm. Birds were singing somewhere in the distance, and the sunlight was just beginning to touch the trees. For a few minutes, she simply stood there, breathing, thinking, remembering. Not long ago, this same quiet house had once made her feel uncertain. She had wondered what life would look like without the daily noise of family life. She had wondered if the silence meant loneliness. But standing there now, she realized something important. The silence had never been the problem. It had simply been unfamiliar. And sometimes, unfamiliar spaces are exactly where new life begins. Her phone buzzed gently on the table beside her. A message appeared on the screen. It was from her youngest daughter. "Good morning, Mom. I miss you." Linda smiled. She typed back a simple reply. "I miss you too. I hope you're having a beautiful day." A moment later, another message appeared. "You sound happy lately." Linda paused for a moment before answering. Because her daughter was right. She did feel different. Not because her children were gone, but because she had learned something about herself. For so many years, Linda had believed that her purpose in life was to raise her children, and she had done that with love and dedication. But now she understood that motherhood had never been the end of her story. It had simply been one chapter, an important chapter, a beautiful chapter, but not the final one. She looked around the backyard quietly. The same trees, the same garden, the same home. But she felt like a different person standing there. Stronger, calmer, more connected to herself. Later that afternoon, Linda walked back inside and sat at the kitchen table. The same table where she had once felt unsure about her future. But today, the feeling was completely different. She opened the small notebook she had started using months earlier. Inside it were simple notes about her days, painting ideas, thoughts from her morning walks, little reminders of things she wanted to try. She turned to a new page and wrote something simple. "Life after motherhood is not empty." She paused for a moment. Then she wrote another line. "It's just another beginning." Those words felt true, because life had not become smaller after her children left. It had simply changed direction. She still loved her children deeply. That would never change. But now she also loved something else. The quiet moments, the peaceful mornings, the freedom to explore new things, the chance to grow in ways she had forgotten were possible. Later that evening, she returned to her small painting desk in the living room, the same place where she had rediscovered her love for art. A blank canvas waited in front of her. For a moment, she simply looked at it. Then she picked up a brush and dipped it into a warm color. Slowly, the first stroke appeared across the canvas. Soft, gentle, full of possibility. Linda smiled quietly. Because she finally understood something that many women only realize later in life. When children grow up and leave home, it doesn't mean a mother's life becomes empty. It simply means she finally has the space to rediscover herself. And sometimes, the quietest moments in life are not the end of our purpose. They are the beginning of the life we were always meant to live.